I never expected to find love on a business trip to Poland, but that's exactly what happened when I met Alex. From the moment I saw her, I was captivated. Her smile lit up the room, and her laughter was infectious. We spent hours talking that first night, and I felt like I'd known her my whole life. Over the next few months, we video chatted every day. I couldn't wait to hear her voice and see her face. The time difference was tough, but it was worth it. I found myself daydreaming about her during meetings and rushing home to call her. When I flew back to Poland to see her again, I knew she was the one. We spent a magical week together, and I didn't want it to end. On my last night there, I got down on one knee and proposed. My heart was pounding as I waited for her answer. When she said yes, I was over the moon. We started making plans for our future together in the States. I was so excited to show her my world, to build a life with her. Every night we'd talk about the house we'd buy, the places we'd travel, the family we'd start. It all seemed so perfect. Getting through the visa process was a nightmare. You guys ever dealt with US immigration? It's like swimming through molasses, except the molasses is filled with bureaucratic nonsense, and you're just praying you don't drown in it. But hey, I figured it was for a good reason. After all, this was for Alex and our future together. We were married now, and the idea was that once we got through all the visa hurdles, she'd be with me in Chicago, and then everything would settle, just like we planned. House, travel, family, the whole deal. I took on most of the paperwork because, well, it's a process. There's a lot of translating, making sure documents are in order, financial forms, proof of our relationship not to mention. I had to prove I could financially support her once she got to the US. I was up to my neck in it, but I didn't mind. Late nights sipping coffee, scanning documents, making sure I hit every little checkbox in the application. Alex, for her part, was always super sweet about it. It was nice. Genuinely. She had this way of making me feel like I was the center of her world. And I mean, why wouldn't she be excited? I was excited too. It was our future. Any frustrations I had melted away every time we would talk on the phone, her voice soft and reassuring. I figured this was normal. That's what you do when you love someone, right? Push through the bureaucratic stuff for the bigger picture. But the waiting. Jesus, the waiting. I remember getting emails about delays, how our case needed additional processing or some form wasn't filed correctly so it had to be resubmitted. I even took time off work once to make a trip to the embassy in person just so I could hand something over. Every time I'd hit submit, I'd feel good for about a week before realizing I was just getting started on another round of waiting. It was like trying to catch smoke. Through it all, Alex was pretty calm. That calmness of hers, it soothed me. She kept saying things like, everything will work out. Just imagine us in Chicago. It'll be perfect. Stuff like that made me feel like the stress was worth it. Like I wasn't grinding my gears into powder for no reason. Just hearing her voice, I could close my eyes and see it all coming together. Months into the process, we finally get the news that we'd been approved for the next step, the interview. That's when we met Ian. Now, I didn't give much thought to the guy at first. He's just a government official, you know. Just someone who's there to do his job like a faceless cog in the gigantic machine that is USIS. But Ian Hale. Yeah, he was something else. Older than me. Sharp suit. A little too polished if you ask me. Like he was trying to impress someone, except doesn't everyone who works for the government have to wear those suits? Anyway, he seemed professional enough during the visa interview. My mind was racing the whole time, trying to make sure everything went smoothly. I had all these documents, proof we were legit. That this wasn't a sham marriage or whatever. I was ready with bank statements, tax records, photos of us together stacked up like some goddamn novel. When we walked into the room, I shook Ian's hand, pretty formal. I was nervous but also excited. This was the last major hurdle. After this, it was just a matter of waiting for the approval, but it didn't take long for me to notice something off. Ian's demeanor, I guess you could say. It started when Alex introduced herself. There's this way she is about her, charming, confident. She wore this red dress that definitely got attention no matter where she went. The minute Ian set his eyes on her, there was this pause. Nothing too crazy, but long enough that I caught it. Remember thinking, well, damn, does he really have to stare that long? But I shrugged it off. Ian kicked off the interview with basic stuff. How we met, how our relationship developed. I was rattling off the timeline without missing a beat. Poland, the proposal, all of it, and every now and then Alex would chime in, and there it was again, that look. Ian looked at her like he was drinking in every word she said, and I'd see him nodding a little slower when she spoke. It's the kind of attention you don't expect from some immigration guy behind a desk based on the stories I've heard. Usually they're just trying to get through the paperwork like anyone would on a Friday afternoon. Then Alex did something that should have registered with me more, but I didn't think twice about it in the moment. She made a joke. Not a great joke, just something light, breaking the formality, and Ian smiled a little too warmly. It knocked me out of my train of thought when I looked over at him and saw his expression like she was the only person in the room. I remember wondering if this interview was something out of the ordinary. Maybe some officers were friendlier than usual because, hell, being charming is a skill in any job, right? You need to get sure people trust you in government roles. But Ian, yeah, he was locked in on her in a way that made my stomach turn. Alex, cool as anything, didn't even flinch. Handled every question with ease, tossing around a flirty smile here and there, but nothing that would seem inappropriate in any normal context. She knew how to play it perfectly, like she had read him the moment we walked in. It didn't miss a beat, didn't overstep. Just enough to keep his interest. I sat there chalking it up to nerves, thinking I was seeing something that didn't exist. Besides, this was my wife. Our life. After the interview, Ian stood up, lingering for a quick second, and as we shook hands, I glanced at him. Something about the way he looked at Alex, it was subtle, but it was definitely a look, like this unspoken moment only they knew. Alex, of course, smiled brightly, thanking him as if it was just a regular Tuesday, and not the most critical moment in our process. On the ride back to the hotel, I kept running the whole thing over in my head, replaying that look Ian gave her. I wanted to say something, but everything still seemed fine between us. After all, hadn't I been the one to push through all those roadblocks for months? I figured I'd bring it up casually later, but I didn't. I couldn't help but think ahead. Chicago, family, future. That's what mattered, right? So I couldn't believe it when Alex's visa was finally approved. After months of anxious waiting, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I immediately booked a flight to Poland, eager to help her pack and start our new life together. Landing in Warsaw, I rushed through the airport, my heart pounding with excitement. When I saw Alex waiting for me, her smile seemed to light up the entire terminal. I swept her into my arms, breathing in her familiar scent. "We did it, baby," I whispered, feeling her warmth against me. "We're really doing this." The next few days were a whirlwind of packing and paperwork. I watched as Alex carefully folded her clothes and wrapped her precious belongings. She seemed quieter than usual, but I chalked it up to the stress of such a big move. Back in Chicago, I threw myself into making our home perfect for Alex. I painted the walls of our apartment in her favorite colors, bought her favorite foods, and even learned to cook a few Polish dishes. I wanted everything to be just right. Those first few months were a dream come true. I loved showing Alex around the city, introducing her to deep dish pizza and the beauty of Lake Michigan. She seemed to be settling in well, making friends with our neighbors and exploring on her own while I was at work. But as time went on, I started to notice little changes. Alex began spending more time away from home, often coming back late without much explanation. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give vague answers and quickly change the subject. "I'm just trying to find my place here," she'd say with a shrug. "It's different from what I expected." I tried not to let it bother me. After all, moving to a new country was a big adjustment. I figured she just needed time and space to adapt. To our second anniversary, the distance between us had grown into a chasm. Alex rarely initiated conversations anymore, and our once passionate relationship had cooled significantly. I found myself constantly trying to bridge the gap, planning special date nights or surprising her with gifts, but nothing seemed to spark that old connection. One night, as we sat silently at dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. "Alex, is everything okay? You seem different lately." She looked up from her plate, her eyes unreadable. "I'm fine, Tom. Just tired from work." I wanted to push further to understand what was really going on in her mind, but something held me back. Maybe I was afraid of what I might discover if I dug too deep. I couldn't believe what was happening. 2 years of marriage, and it felt like I was talking to a stranger. Alex stood there, her eyes cold and distant, as if our entire relationship meant nothing to her. "What do you mean it's not working?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We've built a life together. We talked about starting a family, buying a house." Alex sighed, looking almost bored. "Tom, let's be realistic. We've been drifting apart for months now. You must have noticed." And of course I had noticed, but I'd been holding on to hope, convincing myself it was just a phase. So I thought you were just adjusting to life here. If something was wrong, why didn't you talk to me? She shrugged, her indifference cutting deeper than any words could. There was nothing to talk about. My feelings changed. It happens. I felt like I was drowning, desperately grasping for something solid to hold on to. But our plans, everything we've worked for. "Your plans, Tom," she interrupted. "They were always your plans. I just went along with them." Her words hit me like a truck. Had I been so blind, so caught up in my own vision of our future that I didn't see she wasn't on board? No, that couldn't be right. I remembered how excited she'd been when we first started planning our life together. "That's not true," I said, my voice stronger now. You were just as excited as I was. So what changed? Alex's expression softened slightly, but it wasn't warmth I saw, it was pity. I was excited about coming to America, Tom, about the opportunities here. But the rest of it, the house in the suburbs, the 2.5 kids, that was never what I wanted. I felt sick. So what, you just used me to get here? Was any of it real? She didn't answer immediately. And in that moment of silence, I saw the truth. I saw all the little moments I'd ignored or explained away. The lingering looks from Ian during our visa interview. The way Alex had become more distant after we moved here. The late nights out, the vague explanations. Who is it? I asked, my voice hollow. Alex raised an eyebrow. Does it matter? It's Ian, isn't it? The immigration officer. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by that same cold indifference. You're more observant than I gave you credit for. I laughed bitterly. Not observant enough, apparently. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling lost. How long? A few months, she admitted. We ran into each other by chance. By chance, I repeated. Right. We stood there in silence for what felt like hours. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to understand how she could throw away everything we had built together. But looking at her now, I realized I didn't know this woman at all. What happens now? I finally asked. Alex straightened up, suddenly all business. I think it's best if I move out. We can discuss the details of the divorce later. Divorce. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I nodded numbly, unable to form words. As she turned to leave the room, probably to pack her things, I found my voice again. Was any of it real, Alex? Did you ever love me? She paused at the doorway, her back to me. For a moment I thought I saw her shoulders slump. A hint of the woman I thought I knew. But when she turned to face me, her eyes were as cold as ever. Goodbye, Tom, she said softly, and walked out of the room. I stood there, alone in the silence of my apartment, trying to make sense of how my life had fallen apart so quickly. The future I had imagined, the life we were supposed to build together, it all crumbled around me. And as the reality of the situation sank in, I realized that the woman I had loved, the woman I had married, had never really existed at all. I sat there, stunned, as Alex's words echoed in my ears. I don't love you, Tom. I never really did. The coldness in her voice sent chills down my spine. This couldn't be happening, not after everything we'd been through. You were a means to an end, she continued, her face emotionless. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could the woman I'd loved so deeply, the one I'd built my dreams around, be so ruthless? I struggled to find words, my mind racing to make sense of it all. But our life together, everything we planned. Alex cut me off. It was never real, Tom. Not for me. She stood up, already seeming distant. I'm moving out. I'll be gone by the weekend. I watched in disbelief as she walked away, not even sparing a glance back at me. The apartment suddenly felt huge and empty, the silence deafening. The next few days were a blur. Alex moved with ruthless efficiency, packing up her life as if our time together meant nothing. I caught glimpses of her, but she barely acknowledged me. It was like living with a stranger. On the day she left, I couldn't bear to watch. I heard the door close behind her, and just like that, she was gone. The apartment that was once filled with our laughter, our dreams, now felt like a tomb. I wandered from room to room, memories assaulting me at every turn. The kitchen where we'd cooked together, the living room where we'd cuddled and watched movies, the bedroom where we'd shared our most intimate moments. It all felt tainted now. As the days passed, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I'd been used plain and simple. The woman I thought I knew, the one I'd fallen in love with in Poland, had never really existed. She was a carefully crafted illusion, designed to get what she wanted. I replayed our time together in my mind, looking for signs I might have missed. The way she'd been distant lately, her vague responses when I tried to talk to her. It all made sense now, but hindsight is a cruel teacher. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt even more was the realization that Ian, the immigration officer, had been involved. I remembered the way he'd looked at Alex during our visa interview, the unease I'd felt. I should have trusted my instincts. I later learned that Ian had been more than just Alex's lover. He'd actively helped her leave me, offering financial support and promises of a better life. It was like a knife twisting in my gut. The system that was supposed to protect us had been used against me. As the weeks turned into months, I struggled to move on. My trust in people was shattered. I threw myself into work, trying to forget. But Alex's face haunted my dreams. The life we'd planned together, the future I'd imagined, it was all gone. I couldn't help but wonder if any of it had been real. Had there been moments when Alex truly cared, or was it all just an act? A means to an end, as she'd said? The uncertainty gnawed at me, making it impossible to find closure. The apartment, once our shared space, now felt like a prison. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of Alex and the life we'd never have. I knew I needed to move, to start fresh, but the thought of dismantling the home we'd built together was almost too much to bear. As I packed up our belongings, deciding what to keep and what to discard, I came across a photo album. Inside were pictures from our time in Poland, from our wedding day, from our first months in Chicago. Alex's smile looked so genuine, her eyes filled with what I thought was love. How could it all have been a lie? I sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes and memories, and for the first time since Alex left, I allowed myself to cry. The tears came in waves, grief for the love I'd lost, anger at the betrayal, and fear for the future. I knew it would take time to heal, to rebuild my life and learn to trust again. But as I wiped away the tears, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let Alex's betrayal define me. It would be a long road, but I would find my way back to happiness, even if it meant starting over completely. I tried to move on, but the memories of Alex haunted me. Every corner of our once shared apartment held echoes of her presence. I couldn't help but wonder where she was now, what she was doing. It gnawed at me, this need to know. One day I ran into a mutual friend who'd seen Alex recently. My heart raced as I asked about her, trying to sound casual. The friend's words hit me like a punch to the gut. Alex was thriving, living it up in the city like she'd always wanted. She's got this swanky new place downtown, they said. Seems to be doing really well for herself. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside I was reeling. While I was here, still piecing my life back together, Alex had moved on without a second thought. She'd used me, used Ian, and now she was living her dream life. I couldn't help but picture her in some high-rise apartment, sipping champagne, surrounded by the luxury she'd always craved. The image made me sick. All those nights we'd spent planning our future, dreaming of the life we'd built together, it had all been a lie. The friend mentioned seeing Alex at some exclusive events, rubbing elbows with the city's elite. She'd always had a knack for charming people, for making connections. Now she was using those skills to climb the social ladder, leaving me and Ian in her wake. I thought about Ian, wondering if he knew he'd been played too. Part of me wanted to reach out, to warn him, but what good would it do? Alex had already moved on from both of us. As I walked home that day, the city felt different. Every stylish woman I passed made me think of Alex, living a best life while I was still struggling to find my footing. The unfairness of it all hit me hard. I'd given her everything, my love, my trust, my future, and she tossed it aside like it meant nothing. But as I unlocked my door, a small spark of anger ignited in my chest. Why should I let her win? Why should I let her betrayal define me? I realized then that the best revenge would be to build my own happiness, to create a life that didn't revolve around the memory of Alex.